All right, we are live. Ben and Jerry. We have a Ben and Jerry Sunday.
Oh, there we go.
Uh,
And we're
so
both in stripes,
yes, we did not coordinate our stripage, but my blue stripes and yours are orange or red.
Yeah, orange.
Yeah, and so here we go. Um, I am so excited to have Ben Egerman here joining me on my little Queer Lab Project Sunday, where I like to talk to different people. And I met Ben last month when I was at AWP in Baltimore. It was my first trip to Baltimore. I have to go back now because I didn't really get to see the actual city. I was busy every day, as you were at a table. So Ben, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
And the reason why we're going to be talking is your uh, a gay little history zines, which I have 7 of them here that you've created. And as you say on your website, which people can find at mdhistory.gay, which I will put in the chat, um, a gay little history zines project started by you. You started it last year. And I know that you're a public librarian and historian, but first I just want you to tell us, like, why zines, why this, what prompted it?
Sure. So I I live here in Baltimore, um, and I am a public librarian, and I've been doing lots of research and sort of public programming and stuff, creating resources largely focused around local LGBTQ history. When I was getting my master's degree in library science, I actually did all the research for this giant report. Um, very bad at this. Um, but there was this big study run by a historic preservation group on like queer historic sites in Maryland. And so I started to like do a bunch of research around it. I wound up getting involved with another coworker at the library was doing public like talks on local queer history. So I started doing that. That was many years ago. That was like 8 or 9 years ago. Um, as of that sort of has taken off. At some point in the last 2 years, I came to the conclusion that maybe it was time to do this not in a like library setting, um, but in a bar, in somewhere like a community space, and to sort of aim it at the community in a way that I you can't do if I'm like doing something professionally, right? Which is to say, to be able to like swear on stage.
Right.
And like make dick jokes. Like, and so I decided on zines. I'm still not entirely sure how I came up with zines, uh, but I decided that I would basically write up some of the stories that I knew from all of this sort of drier library and research work into something fun. Um, and that's so I started off with this one's called Queer Characters. It's the first one. And this was all like effectively like trans outlaws in the 1800s in Baltimore, which all of them are insane and like it's fun. It's fun to read about. There's one who's like serial, like the trans man who just keeps on stealing horses.
Right, I'm a trans horse thief.
Yeah, there's a trans horse thief. I call it gender affirming horse theft at one point. Um, but like it's fun. There's a lot of fun to it, and like being able to like talk about these things, and sometimes they're very heavy things, but being able to talk about it and like enjoy it. And what I found is that people are just absolutely hungry for this kind of stuff. Um, People are so excited to learn about this stuff because you can't find out about it anywhere else.
Well,
Um,
tell us a little bit for, most of us assume we understand what an archive is, but many people might not have ever been to an archive. They might not understand archive fever when you get so excited when you discover something. So, will you just tell us a little bit about, like, obviously there's the research side, but what is an archive and what is a queer archive?
yeah, so effectively, an archive, uh, the broadest sort of lay definition I can give you um, would be archives and libraries exist in a place where we have to balance having people access it and it being available to people and preserving the item, right? So preserving the book or whatever. Um, and so libraries focus very much on the access. We don't really care if a book, if a, books get discarded every day and we have to reorder them. An archive focuses on preservation. Their primary goal is preserving sort of records of whatever kind. And then their sort of mission is to then figure out how to provide access to it. But they
And it may
focus
have
on,
letters, it could have ephemera, it could have
yeah,
receipts, like all kinds of things, right?
yeah. So like, I did some research at one point. I went up to New York to the Lesbian Herstory Archives, which is like iconic. It is amazing. And they have, a whole file that's like lesbians from dot dot dot. And so, they have it arranged by state. And so I pulled their Maryland stuff, and it would be there were newsletters, there was a little like there's a lesbian newspaper in the 70s in Baltimore that like there were issues of. There were like newspaper clippings, all sorts of stuff that then I got to like sort through and be like, oh, this is actually like really, really helpful.
Right.
And their job has been preserving that.
I got to visit the one archive a few years ago. Actually, I guess it was 10 years ago now. And that was the first time I got really nerdy about an archive just because it's like there were all these boxes and you'd open one and there's like a trophy in it. You open this other one, it's like Harry Hayes, I don't know what it is. Like it was like actual things. And then I got to see all these publications that I've written for over the years that no longer exist. So I was like, "Oh, I'm in the archive. I didn't even think about that."
Yeah.
Like, like all these queer publications that have gone defunct and they keep them, all the Damrons, all the, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
everything.
That's how I started actually. The first sort of like serious research that I did on like way back when in like 2018 um was actually I know it was 2020. But I went up to Philadelphia for a friend's wedding and stayed an extra day and went to the William Way archives there. Um and pulled all of the old guidebooks, right? These guides of, the world, mostly US, of like gay places effectively. It was designed for like gay men who are traveling.
Mhm.
Um, and you can see what people were saying were the places to go in Baltimore or in, Boston or whatever. It's a snapshot. And so when you get all of them together, you start seeing like, oh, this bar was open for this period of time, and then this bar was open for this period of time, right? And you can start to see sort of where nightlife exists at these different points in time.
Yeah.
I find that really, really cool.
Well, one of the ones I want us to talk about in particular is the pansy craze. And part of that is because it's the jazz era drag balls of West Baltimore. And on Friday night, I got to go see Cats the Jellicle Ball. And as you mentioned, you're going to be going soon. You're coming up to New York to see it. And I
Yes.
will say you'll be really pleased that there's a part in the production. This isn't giving away anything, where they actually do have archival images and actually show history on screen and show ballroom scenes and things from Harlem and other parts of where ballroom was a huge thing. So you'll enjoy that there's even a bit of queer archive history up on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited about that. No, this is one of the amazing things, yeah, the pansy craze. So this, uh, there's been some sort of like articles online about it in the last few years of like, yeah, there was this big sort of craze around like, a- around like drag and sort of having these sort of basically like fruity comic relief characters in like all sorts of early Hollywood movies, and all that. Uh, However, at the same time, much less sort of well known is that in black neighborhoods uh, across the country, people were starting to form these like annual balls.
Mhm.
And they were pageants, they were drag pageants, right? They were juried and you know all of that. But yeah, in Baltimore and DC had in Baltimore and DC both are now majority black. At the time they were not, but were still had two of the largest black communities in the country. And so some of the largest balls were happening here. And for whatever reason, the uh, the local black newspaper, the Baltimore Afro, was very willing to cover it and sent photographers. And what's really amazing about this, and you can download any of my zines on my website. So if you look it up, if you go to that website, it's called the Pansy Praise. You can actually see these um, images yourself. Uh, what's amazing, we're going to talk about archives again, um, is that I knew about this and had the images from like low quality scans, like microfilms. Um, so very low quality images of these drag queens, which is still unbelievable, right? Drag queens from the 20s and 30s. Um, the Baltimore Afro is still around, unlike almost all of the other newspapers, like black newspapers of the time, and they have an archive. And so
Wow.
what was amazing about this was that I was at some point able to connect with people in the Afro archives, and say, hey, you had all this coverage. Do you think that maybe there's anything in there? And they found it, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And because of that archive, we actually have the original photos. And it's like night and day to see sort of you get to see the detail of it. And of course, drag is such a like visual thing that like being able to see the actual dresses and like, how people were making themselves up and like all sorts of stuff is just like unbelievable. But yeah, no, this was,
Tell me how that feels when you discover that.
um, it was like, shocking.
Yeah.
Um, because it's something you don't expect to exist. Right. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, this sort of like, this gives so much more sort of like life to this story and to these people, um and to be able to actually see it and like there's like I don't know there on the back of this one um is a few other pictures. In this one there's one where it's just like the queen is just like staring dead into the like camera, and I just remember like clicking on the like, oh, we found some things, and seeing that image is like gasping. Um, because like here's someone from like the 19, I think it's like 1932 or something. Um, like and just like looking you right in the eyes.
So let's talk about that because I know you're friends with Hunter Ohanian, and I interviewed him years ago when I was at Out Magazine, and I remember learning so much about the Leslie Lohman Gallery and how they came to their archive because people were either throwing out their relatives' stuff when they died of AIDS, or they were donating it because they didn't want it to be destroyed, and so they have tons of stuff in their archive because of that. But so many queer archives have been lost because people either destroyed them intentionally, or they even asked friends, like, "If I die, will you destroy all of this because I don't want my family to know these things about me?" So when we do find these queer archives, it can be quite special because so many have been lost to history.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing that I think I talk about a lot actually in my zines is like we don't have access to sort of generational memory like as queer folks, like in the same way that like most like sort of ethnic or racial or language based communities really do, right? Where it's just like, I know, my family is like Ashkenazi Jewish, means that I know quite a bit about like sort of the history of Jews in America solely because I know the history of my family, right?
Yeah.
And so those stories actually get passed down, and oftentimes documents go along with it. Whereas for queer people, it's like the exact opposite, right? Which is that your family is usually not a particularly safe place for your documents. And you have to actively sort of work to create those linkages with the past and, who you are now.
Yeah, I actually talked to, Neil and Hugh who do the love books, the of all the archival images, and we talked about that as well, like the special images that were saved by some people or, were maybe misunderstood, so they survived, that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of those images on top of, like, one of the things in the archive is words, but as you're mentioning, it's also images, right?
Yeah.
Photography, other types of things. Is there anything in particular that stands out in your mind and you're like, "Oh my god," other than what you just talked about with these amazing photos that you were surprised to find in your research?
Um, let's see. That, I mean, those were the really big ones. I mean, the main surprise has always just been how far back you can find things. It's um, the first stories that I write about in this are from the 1830s, and it's right there for you to find it. You have to know how to look for it, but like it, it really is just right there.
The other thing you mentioned, and it's important to note, is often it can seem and I've read a lot of gay history, so I know this comes up a lot, but it can seem like a lot of the times this is all about being criminalized, it's about legal records, it's about people being imprisoned or being, somehow, admonished, and so one thing that a historian like you can do is you're a sort of caretaker of these stories and you can reinterpret them, right?
Yeah, and sort of try and pull out the story in a way that makes that's not sort of falling for that.
Okay.
Because you're that's the whole thing. Um, you read all these sort of sources that you see are all of these reports of crimes
Yeah.
because basically being considered in the wrong like gender's outfit was a crime, and one that like usually drew notice. And so you see all these different articles, and they're all this like crime reporting, and you can very easily come to the conclusion that like effectively all queer people are criminals. Most of us are not that interesting, but like, uh, but yeah, no, I mean you sort of have to figure out what the story is, because you're hearing it from a fairly hostile source. And so figuring out, okay, if you take away sort of the assumptions or the sort of judgment that's being put here, what is this a story of,
Right.
right? Is a really important thing, right? Um, because again, that allows you to sort of see like, oh, these, there's a woman during the like a little before the Civil War who is she's a trans woman, seems to be a sex worker. Um, Actually, a lot is written about her because she basically gets arrested in one place and then talks her way out of it, out of like jail time by saying, it's okay. I'll just go to the next city over and then repeat. And I track this, like, there's like a dozen like times this happens. But after you pull it all out, you're like, oh, we actually know a lot about this woman. And like, we know sort of how she talked about herself, how she sort of explained herself to authorities. Um, and we can see how that changes. We can see, like, we actually can see a little bit about like who this person was and like
Mm.
make some sense of it. Um, and so, yeah, I think that like being able to pull that out is super important. The other one example I give for that is at the end of um, doing this because it's the Queer Love Project. The end of the Pocomoke tragedy, which was a well, this is when queer love goes wrong, I guess, because it's two young women who are basically openly dating in a rural town in the eastern part of Maryland. Uh, there's some questions of jealousy, and then one of them shoots the other. Um, However, at the end of this is a different story. It's the only time I've written about something that didn't happen in Maryland,
Oh,
because it happens like just south of the state line in Virginia. But it's these two guys who very similarly, like, one is super effeminate. Everyone knows it. Um, there's like he and his boyfriend are planning a gay wedding, right? And like open to a level that's sort of shocking, but eventually there's a debate over what the bride's to wear. They each pull a gun on each other and both shoot each other, but decide that they don't want to press charges, and instead are seen walking off through the woods together effectively, after they recover. Uh, and I sort of kept looking at this story and like I realized that when one of the two died, um, which was 40 years after this happened, um, the other placed a like in memoriam piece that was like this long ode of like it was a love letter, right? And like you look at this, I'm like, oh, I pulled this story from this like wild sort of you know context of this two guys like shooting each other, because they couldn't decide which color one of them was to wear, at the gay wedding. Um, and from that I was able to, look and find this much later thing that shows, oh, these two guys actually basically remained together for the rest of their lives.
mm.
And they actually, and then, and I started looking into it, I was like, oh, they always lived extremely close to each other. Neither of them ever married. Like, and, it does. It sort of like turns this into a very strange love story.
Yeah.
But it humanized it just humongously to see, like, effectively from this sort of sensationalist newspaper article to, this very heartfelt, like, in memoriam for this guy's, lover who just passed.
Well, I also think that's why it's really important for many instances to have a gay or queer historian working on this, because I've been really disappointed with a few books that I've read where I can tell that the author is more interested in the true crime element, for example, and the way that they're interpreting certain stories. I'm not going to name the book, but it was about the murders that happened in New York in the 90s, at the townhouse. And it was a very disappointing book because I felt like it was just trying to be prurient. And then luckily there's a documentary about the same thing on HBO where I could tell like more queer people were involved and they kind of fix the record and kind of deal with certain things.
Yeah.
But that also happens with language. And I remember when I was reading Secret City, which is a really amazing history about queer life in DC for basically all of the 20th century. And I thought that that author who was gay actually did a really good job of talking about what language he was going to use, why he was going to use it, when he was going to use it. I know you probably have to deal with that as well, the anachronisms of using present terms for things that weren't maybe used before. How do you determine that?
Um, I a part of me is at a point of um, I think we argue too much about it.
Yeah.
Like my line is always like, look, I'm not precious about this. I don't know how these people would uh, identify, but at some level, we're constantly guessing.
Mhm.
We're always going to be guessing because we don't know. And so, like, the question to me is always less of like whether you're using like sort of how much you're sort of beating around the bush of like language, and I do it too. I talk about, these are people who we would today see as trans, right? Um, and at the same time, I'm like, is this a trans history? Yes, 100%.
Mhm.
Like, um, and so I think at some level we can just sort of look at it and say, like, is this in line with what this person sort of said? Does that speak for itself? And to what extent can we just say, look, we're not entirely sure, but this is what I think.
Right. Let's talk about this one because you have a lot of stories about sapphic love and sapphic things, which of course is even a term that for many people is new. Instead of using lesbian, we're using sapphic as a sort of umbrella term,
Yeah.
and we can debate that as well. But tell me a little bit about how you put that one together. It's called the Friday Nights.
Okay. This one was fun. Um, so this was about effectively, I knew the story of one of the women in it. This was a group of like heiresses um, in Baltimore in the Gilded Age, and like about and two of them are like there were two sets of Boston marriages,
Right.
right? That sort of came out of it. Um,
I don't know. Austin marriage is a term that people use when two women were living together and had a life together, but weren't obviously legally married.
yeah, um, and I knew that one of them uh, became one of the wealthiest women in the world and funded the Johns Hopkins Medical School,
Oh wow.
which in Baltimore, that's the biggest,
Yeah, that's biggest.
huge sort of driver of things. It's our biggest university and it's sort of a world class like medical school, and so that's a big deal. And that she did it on the condition that women be admitted on the same basis as men. And then I started looking into what the story was with these women. A bunch of them were very sort of, you know, have biographies written about them. They're very like luminary people, and they were messy as hell. They were like there was legitimately one who was trying and failing to get in, like basically start an affair with another one of the women. These five women, four of them are dating each other, and like effectively one of them is trying to cheat on another with one of the other women in one of the women in the other Boston marriage. Um, and like it is wild to watch as, this was hilariously like all of the projects they took on together were like undercut by like sort of these things of like, oh, is like, Mamie really doing this just to get closer to, Mary or whatever. Um, and then it actually ties into a separate story, which is one of the first um, students at like female students at Hopkins Medical School uh, was Gertrude Stein,
Oh,
who yeah, who prior to becoming a world famous writer well, prior to moving to Paris to do so, dropped out of med school after having her own uh, like love triangle with these two other with one of the um, with the girlfriend of one of her classmates.
So it's
Um,
funny that you say that because as you're telling me about their messiness, I kept thinking, "Oh, I just finished the new Gertrude Stein biography, and that was all about their messy thing." So that
so
now overlap.
that shows up in there. That shows
Yeah.
up in there because Gertrude Stein's first book is an attempt
Yes.
to sort of write out this like troubled affair that she had with her classmate's girlfriend. Um, and she decides that like, oh, it's too explicit for the world today and hides it away. Many years later, um, she finds it again. She is hands it to Alice E. Toklas to
Matches up the names of the
yeah, and she like and Alice goes nuts because like effectively she's like she had no clue that Gertrude had to have this like relationship or affair or whatever beforehand. Just goes absolutely like is just furious at her. And in response, Gertrude Stein says, "Well, maybe I should work on like the autobiography of Alice E. Toklas then."
Yeah.
And like
And makes it up
that,
to her by making it yes, exactly.
yeah, exactly. But like it's this wild story that all sort of comes back of like, oh yeah, this is cycles of messiness.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that book, I have to say, was really, delicious in the details when you realize, like, oh, maybe part of the books that we've gotten from Gertrude Steiner because of Alice's heavy editing because of her jealousies, and you're like, "Never thought about that."
Yep.
Uh, so it was an interesting one. Um, so I have a couple other questions that I wanna make sure we hit before we wrap up, but the first one is because I know there might be questions from some of the people who've joined us, is what about people's personal archives? Everybody thinks like, "Well, I have all this stuff. Should I donate it to someone?" And some places like New York Public Library is like, "Please do not because we do not have s." It takes a lot of money and space to maintain archives. So what should some of us who think like, "Well, I don't want my papers to be disappeared. What should I do?"
So this is a constant issue, and it's one we're dealing with here too.
And I'm putting
Um,
it in the chat because I did interview these archivists, out of London who deal with this as well with love letters, and they want people to send their love letters if you have them.
yeah, no, the thing is like finding institutions that are capable of doing that. And like we're talking long term of how to do that here in Baltimore. Because this is a serious issue of like people don't know where to send things. There is one project that's being run by someone here that I love called the Queer Stories Preservation Project.
Nice.
Uh, and it's this the person who runs it is an object conservator at a museum, right? And just deals with like conservation and like of physical things and gets like other sort of museum professionals to tell people, like teach people how to best preserve and take care of your own archive
Mhm.
so that it is, you know, like, um, so effectively, like, while we're in a spot where you don't know where to send it, you can still make sure that you're keeping it in a way that preserves it.
Preserving queer stories. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really you know it's a tough thing because we all know that there's this is where most of the photos, the letters, the journals, the whatever are in people's private collections, and so trying to figure out how to make sure that those don't disappear. I mean, that's tough.
So my other big question for you is, well, actually, before I get to that, I wanna ask you then, are you preserving yours? What are you doing with your stuff?
Yeah, I have a whole large sort of pile of various boxes and
Off
um,
screen, there's a boxes and boxes, and it's full of stuff.
yeah. No, I am trying to make sure that whatever I do, I keep good documentation of it. And I think that's important because among other things, the way that I've done this, and again, like, you have been to one of my events. These are effectively like take place at a gay bar. Um, it's a free event, but we sell the zines to benefit a local like queer nonprofit or activist group or whatever. Um, and it's me with a PowerPoint
Yeah.
and like going through some of this history. And people go nuts for it because like it sort of hits a few different um, sort of things of people wanting, sort of physical media these days. People sort of wanting to hear this history that's, not really told anywhere else. Um, but what I like about that is, and it's the same reason that I am sort of try to keep my own records, is that I think this is not happening because of Baltimore being great or really because of me being particularly great. I think that this is successful because this is a good model, right? Like, I think that like it's actually like the idea of, oh, presenting something like this in a community space, doing it, that being a way of sort of talking about history is, it does it'll succeed outside of Baltimore too, you know?
Well, what I like with you talking about that is I had this idea, this dream that eventually with Queer Love Project, I wanna take it on the road and do like a kinda like traveling, Lollapalooza with, presentations and zine making and music and workshops and take it around the country, especially to smaller places that aren't, the kind of coastal elite places where there's more access to things, take it to small towns. So we'll have to get you, in our little traveling circus of
Oh yeah,
misfits giving.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
But before that, where is the Ben Egerman, uh, queer Baltimore book? Are you working on it?
Yeah, so it's going to be coming out in a few months.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Um,
Is there metadata on it? Is it out there?
it's not yet.
Okay.
We just purchased an ISBN for it.
Okay.
But yeah, we have it's going to be sold by a local bookstore called Red Emma's.
Okay.
Uh, yep, and they're working with me. They've been spectacular. They're the ones who are really sort of, they have a relationship with the local small press, and so yeah, we'll be releasing it. I'm not sure exactly when, but
Well, we will announce it and share with everybody when it's available.
yeah, no, that is the what I'm currently working on. That is very very exciting to me because yeah, it's effectively um, at some point I realized uh, after like the sixth one of these, um, someone came up and was like, "When are you going to write a book?" And I said, I think I just did. You know, because that's the truth is like each of these it's just a collection of these.
Yeah.
Um, but that's my sort of plan with it is, um, all the ones that I've done so far are going to be in this book. I'm still going to continue doing, new, zines, not as
Mm.
many as I have in the last year because it was a lot. Um, but, uh, effectively have hopefully, a volume one that's like the first X number of zines and then be able to release another one, in a year or so. And keep that going.
That's amazing. Congrats.
Thank you. Um, but yeah.
So what is other than finishing this book and getting it out there, what other projects do you have in the works, with all your queer Baltimore knowledge?
Yeah. So one thing I really like, that I'm really excited about, there's a local, immersive theater company, that decided, I don't know if it was like after they had seen the pansy craze thing that I did, or they'd already decided and came to it. But no, their next show is going to be like you step foot into a pansy club.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm really enjoying this because I get to be like, meeting with them, doing little like historic, you
You're the
know,
dramaturg.
chronometers. Yeah. I
Yeah.
have not done that in many, many years. But no, it's exciting to me because I'm so used to this being the stuff that I talk about, at work. And like, I love doing it. And, you know, at the same time, I'm going to be traveling like, I think 8 times in June and July, to go to different libraries in the state of Maryland and talk about like queer history. And I love doing it. Um, but the idea of like, oh, this is something that like people are making like a theater production out of, and like seeing people do that that's so cool to me. Like that's
You
what
never know
excites
what
me.
it's gonna inspire, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
was my partner is a academic, and I was editing his first book, and there was a section of it where I was like, "Oh, this to me feels like a TV show," and I did, like, a whole TV treatment based on this archival work that he had done. He's like, "Oh, I never imagined that the," and I was like, "No, I see the narrative, I see the characters," so you never know how it will trigger other people to come up with ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm doing a good deal of that, and then plotting out the next. I think four is what we've settled on, next year for doing four zines. Um, the next one is going to talk about a fairly well known, cult classic queer filmmaker, who put Baltimore on the map. Um,
Mhm.
Whoever could it be? Yeah, and
Mine is in the background right there,
yeah, and
so
exactly. And like we even got to Vine in the background. So yeah, the next one's going to be about John Waters and like early days of, how these sort of queer weirdos, um, from the suburbs, of Baltimore, like became these like sort of iconic, you
counterculture
know,
icons, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like cultural icons. Absolutely. Yeah.
I got to meet Meek Stoll and interview her once, and she was really great, and, this whole generation is getting older, so I'm glad that you're also documenting it while we still have so many people who are part of it.
Yeah. Um, it's, it's funny. It's also funny living in Baltimore because, um, these people are so iconic. And like John Waters is such an icon. He's also just like an 80-year-old gay man who lives in Baltimore. And like I run into him at the grocery store sometimes. Like,
That's the things that I love. I remember when I visited Reykjavik, I kept thinking, "Am I gonna run into Bjork at the grocery store?" Like, that's what I just wanted to do because everybody says that they do, and like, these people are
yeah,
just regular people.
yeah,
So Um, I just before I let you go, I did wanna ask you because we've read so much over the years and many people have experienced the battleground at the library, and you're a librarian. It sounds like you have a really great library system in Maryland, but tell us just a little bit about, like, how that it has been for you over the last 10 years or so.
yeah. So Maryland has a really good setup for libraries, where effectively the city library in Baltimore also provides services to the rest of the state, including any sort of presentation we make in Baltimore, we offer throughout the state. And so, as a result, I do these types of presentations really throughout Maryland.
Mhm.
Um, and the zine stuff, in many ways, one of the sort of inciting incidents for it really was, I had a program planned for a conservative part of the state. It was planned before the 2024 election. And about 2 weeks after the, no, it was about a month after the 2024 election, it was canceled because the new, um, like council, which was aligned with Moms for Liberty, said that they would, mm, uh, zero out any funding for the public library if they ever presented anything that was LGBTQ. Um, and so, for me, it's one of these things of like, I know that it's going to happen at some point.
Mhm.
Um, right. Like even being in a, reliably like blue state, like on the East Coast, that's what's out in the world. And yeah, like even like blue states are very, very conservative areas. Um, and so I think in some ways, uh, my taking sort of some of this work outside of like library work and into the community was my sort of response to that and sort of, giving myself a outlet for all this stuff that was frankly like where I didn't have to worry about that.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, I just wanna thank you for all of this work, and also just joining us on Queer Love Project and talking about your passion and your knowledge, and I'm sure you've, like, inspired some people to now wanna go plunder some archives. I mean, they're not gonna take anything from them, they're just gonna look at them and access them. If they want to go to, mdhistory.gay, that's your website, and they can
that's my
find
website. I also am on Instagram with the same handle. Um, that's really sort of the only way to, you know, find out what I do. But really, everything that I do, I want to make this accessible. I keep on saying this, like, this would be a terrible way for me to try to make money. So, like, I just put these up. The PDFs are online. You can print them yourself. Um, I want people to have this information. I want people to sort of be able to access it.
it's great. I just love that people do extra work, that they have passions, that they share it, and that they're educating other people. So, thanks, Ben,
Well, thank you. I'm
and
again.
we're gonna figure out an event to do together.
Oh, oh yes. Um, yeah, 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 yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Alright. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you
You too.
later.
Bye bye.